meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors. And can we have a determination of the quorum, Mr. General Manager?
Yes, happy to do so. Director Scott Houston. Here. Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray. Director Harold Williams. Here. President Desi Alvarez.
Here. And do we have any public comments?
Mr. President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak under public comment, please indicate so now by raising your virtual hand. President Alvarez, I do not see any requests.
Okay, and I don't believe we have any presentations today.
That is correct.
So, we'll move on with the board calendar and, we're gonna defer the acting calendar to the end of the meeting. The item on the acting calendar, is in part brought forward by Director Gray, and she will not be joining us for a little bit later in the meeting. So that's going to the information calendar and that the fiscal year 24-25 budget workshop. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, thank you very much, President Alvarez. This initial information item does begin on packet page 9, which provides a brief summary in the background information related to the fiscal year 24-25 budget workshop number 5. The presentation actually begins just 2 pages later on packet page 11. So I'll introduce this item and walk you through the PowerPoint presentation. We do have our Chief Financial Officer, Winnie Nakamura, here, as well as some staff managers to answer any questions. Because this is our 5th budget workshop, there's some information that will move forward through fairly quickly. However, if any member of the board of directors has any specific questions or would like to stop and discuss any specific item, please let us know at that moment, and we're happy to go into more of those details. So if we can turn to the next slide. As we always do, we always want to highlight for those members of the public that will be joining us today and watching at a later date, the West Basin mission to provide a safe and reliable supply of high quality water to the communities that we serve. This budget is detailed with this in mind, and we continue to strive for that year in and year out. The budget workshop agenda, we'll talk a little bit about the budget workshop schedule, just as a reminder. We'll talk a little bit about the fiscal year 24-25 revenue comparisons with the RSC increase of 5 versus a 10%. The reason this is here is because at the last budget workshop, those were the 2 that were honed in on. You'll notice that later in the presentation, we did reinsert the 7.5, just again for an opportunity to kind of look and compare. We have a brief overview of our fiscal year 24-25 expenses summary. We have the fiscal year 24-25 debt payment and future years debt payments. We have the fiscal year 24-25 projected cash available for CIP and projected year-end cash balances. And then last but not least, the fiscal year 24-25 West Basin RSC, the reliability service charge, the potable recycled water rate options, and fixed service charge. So we always want to highlight that because we do encourage all of our retail agencies and members of our community to follow these meetings. So I always want to highlight that towards the end. If we can go to the next slide. This is where we are. Originally, you'll recall, we wanted to go through 4 budget workshops. We had a 5th one that was tentative. We had that just recently on May 30th. And then we added the June 7th as we've been honing in on where we want to go with this budget. Again, at the last budget workshop, it was discussed that we would focus in on the 5 and the 10%, but you'll see again that we've added the 7.5 just for comparisons. Next slide. So you can see here just projected revenues, the difference between the 5 and the 10%. If the board were to choose the 10% over the 5%, it would include an additional 1.272 million that would be dedicated towards capital. Next slide. As I mentioned, we plan to go through some of these things very quickly. I just wanted to highlight this. This is what was shown on the most recent board workshop. Actually, the last couple of workshops does include the final proposed budget of $69,129,670. Again, this was a reduction of $3,234,864 from the original board workshop. I do want to say thank you very much to all of our project managers, department managers for looking at their budgets and really carving into those and looking to see where we. Next slide.
I could interrupt you.
Yes.
On this particular, so just so that we're all understanding the budget in terms of the proposed expenditures is gonna be $69 million. We've gone through all of the information, or the different categories. And if anybody has any questions about any category, or any comments, they should raise them. We're not gonna go through every one this time. And my comment would be that notwithstanding the general manager's comment, this is a reduction from the proposed budget. It actually is an increase of $5 million from the current expenditure. So the proposed budget was significantly higher than what we've spent. And that there's, if we're looking at the budget overall, there's still an opportunity to go back and review different categories where there could be some additional cost savings above and beyond the reductions that were made from the proposed budget. So I don't know what, anybody else has any comments? If you do, please make them. There are items in here that I know that I have previously said I don't support, and they have not been removed, but they do have the support of the rest of the board. So there's no comments. I'm sorry, we can move on.
Well, I'll jump in really fast, just so I hear, or I want to make sure I heard you correct. I think you said something along the lines of they've reduced by, what was it, 5 million? Is that the number I heard from what they originally started?
They reduced it 3.2.
Oh, just, okay, what's in red? I thought you said 5 something.
No,
Maybe I
increased
misheard.
it 5 million from where we are.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It's an increase of 5 million
Oh.
from this year's expenditure.
Okay, got it.
I
I was trying to just,
Hours, if I can add some information to this particular slide, package number 18. So if you take a look at, I think at the our very first budget workshop, we did told the board that, you know, we had to tighten up the current year costs spent, okay? One of the things that we've been working on is a delay for hiring a lot of positions. So if you take a look at our projection for FY 24, like the current projection for our West Basin labor and benefit is going to be only 8.3, but then our budget, is 10.5 million, right? So we're actually saving by now the hiring people. We're over there, we're saving $2.1 million, right? And if we add that $2.5 million back into the projection, as of we hire people at the beginning of the year, then that is going to be like 66 million, right?
I appreciate that. The reality is that we function perfectly well from my point of view at the current level. So I do not think that the justification that you are moving forward is valid, because yes, you could have spent more money based on the budget, but you didn't spend it. You still succeeded. You still delivered all of the services. So where we are, from my point of view, is fine.
okay. let's move on, if that's all right.
To move on to the next slide, you can see, to get into our debt payment, this is something that was presented again at our most recent board meetings. It does show that we do have debt, clearly. You can see our existing debt payments, which includes the principal and interest there in that first column. Then you can see additionally the debt incurred from the Carson Phase 2 expansion, the Carson Phase 2 loan as well, and then the PV lateral, and then the line of credit that we just approved. And then finally, our total debt payments for the fiscal years. You can see there that there are significant drop-off periods right there between the fiscal year 30 and fiscal year 31. And then again, fiscal year 32 and fiscal year 33. And so one of the things that you'll be hearing from staff throughout these budget discussions is always preparing for the loss of revenue, but also preparing for this decrease in cost of debt. Next slide.
Before you move on to the next slide, if we could kind of clarify what that debt is. And I know that we have supplemental information that was not included in the package or the presentation, I should say. But I have in front of us the information with the total amount of debt that we have and kind of how that moves through. And I think it's worthwhile to have a discussion. And I have to apologize. I'm looking at this myself for the first time. So on the handout that you provided, I'm a little confused because it seems a little higher than I thought we had. It says that the outstanding balance on our current debt is 231 million.
And Director Roberts, I apologize for bringing this in at the workshop. West Basin staff had a chance to meet with the board president on Wednesday afternoon, walking through the presentation, and this was requested. Unfortunately, in order to pull together the tables, it took us some time, so we weren't able to get it in time to post at the yesterday before the 24 hours. But Wendy is here and is happy to walk you through these materials.
Yes, so there is a direct hours. I apologize because I had a doctor appointment yesterday in the morning. So I came back and I developing these two tables for your request. So the first table, basically is including every single outstanding debt that we have right now. And then including our debt, total outstanding debt as of each end fiscal year. And then our principal payment for each year, interest payment for each year, our total payment for each year. So that is all laid out 5 different kind of debt we currently have. And then also per your request, I added up the total bond payment outstanding for each at the end of each fiscal year, and then also total other loans. So that's, I believe, in one of the table you requested.
So when it says debt payments on this first, you get the yellow one.
Yeah.
So outstanding balance, this is not the balance of the debt. This is so when I think of balance, how much money do I owe?
That is exactly how much money we owe.
We owe 231 million. If I wanted to write a
Correct.
check today to pay off how much I owe, I'd have to write a check for $231 million.
Correct.
Okay, so our debt isn't 170 or 180 million. Our debt is 231 million.
The principal is 174.
Well, that's the debt. It's
Yeah.
principal.
Yes,
That's my question.
yes.
The way I'm seeing this, I don't understand. So I'm asking,
Yes.
how much debt do I have? What is the principal?
Okay, so the principal is, we have another handout also, per your request, only laid out the principal. That's the simple one. The second page, right? So that is responded to your question, say, if we just consider principal, forget about interest, the total debt as of today is 174 million for the principal. And then for our loan, it's the 926 million total principal.
Okay, so that's this table.
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry. So our total debt is 174,000,000. 175 basically, with that's our bonded indebtedness. And then the 19 million is,
The 19 million is the state loan.
okay. What's 130,000?
And the 130,000 is the 30 million letter of credit, the annual fee, the board just approved at the last meeting.
Okay. So we own that, so our totals, we want to pay everything off and at zero. We have to pay $195 million approximately. That's our total debt.
That is the total principal we have to pay back. Yes.
Okay. So thank you for finally producing. I think one of the things I wanted to see was that we do have drop-off points as we are paying off our principal and interest. So if you look at it, there's a significant drop-off around 2031, 32, where the debt goes down by about $20 million. So that's one drop-off point. And I think that's important because I think when we look at our principal and interest payments, there is some drop off at those points. And this is kind of coincide when we're gonna have a drop off in the revenue from the standby fund. So one of the things I had really wanted to see was kind of where are we gonna be balancing things out? And this is very helpful. I'm glad I finally had the table in the way. And a little more time hopefully now to review it, but you can kind of see that there is some drop off in that. So if we don't incur an awful lot more debt, we are actually moving forward to dealing with the issue of having a reduction in the standby fund. As long as we don't incur debt.
That is correct. And as you and I have discussed, when you look at where we are as far as our financial status and the use of debt, I think you and I agree that we want to minimize that and really strategize around those significant drop-offs, because that's how we're going to get to a position where we can really thrive within the industry as far as these water recycling facilities are around us. Where we are financially is not something that the district can fix in a day and or a year. We really need to analyze the information that Director Alvarez just pointed out and really strategize around that. So thank you, Desiree, for putting that up. I want to make sure, and it looks like you've already done that, included the additional attachments in the chat.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So if we can go back to the PowerPoint presentation, and again, the handouts that we just provided do provide kind of a deeper dive into this chart right here. But again, you can see those drop-offs that Director Alvarez just mentioned there between 2030 and 2031. And then again, as you go through the drop-off of the debt payment and the debt schedule. If we go to the next slide. So we won't spend a lot of time on this, but we are here and available to answer any questions that you might have. These are the presentations that we've been providing you since Budget Workshop 3. This is an overview of our current projects and efforts in relation to CIP. And this slide is continued on the next slide. Again, you have that total or subtotal of 30.2 million. Large portion of that 2.2 million is West Basin labor, which brings you to the 28 million. And if we go to the next slide, These are our projects for consideration. Again, most of these have partnership opportunities, and we're looking at them in the long term, looking to secure funding for these in our new refinery agreements. Go to the next slide, because this is continued. And then the projects for consideration, you can see again that the subtotal right there is the 1.325, subtracted the 232,000 of staff labor, which brings you to slightly over $1 million. And the reason we included these in here is because that's the total amount of CIP that we've been discussing for the past couple of workshops. If you can go to the next slide. So this has been the heart of our discussions over the last couple of workshops, is really where a potential rate increase would place us as far as our total expenses when it comes to the total of CIP and what we could fund there. Because as Director Alvarez just pointed out, if our effort and our strategy is to minimize newly incurred debt, then looking at rate options that can provide as much money for capital might be prudent. So if we look here, we do have the 5 and the 10 that were discussed at the last budget workshop. But as I mentioned, we did include the 7.5 there. You can see that the cash available for CIP, if you look at the 5%, would be almost 23 million. At 7.5%, it would be 23.5 million. And at 10%, it would be slightly over 24 million. And as I just totaled up in the previous slides, you can see there, that's the total amount of CIP projected spending at 29.1 across the board. So really what we're looking at is the projected beginning cash reserve balance and where we are with that, and what it would take in order to fund our CIP without utilizing any additional or new debt. You can see that depending on the rate increase there, you would have anywhere from the 62.7 million up to $64 million continued in your cash reserve. Turn to the next slide. This is just the rating agency assessment of liquidity and coverage. Again, we've talked a little bit about this, about our total debt coverage, and then of course our cash reserves, trying to maintain our current credit rating. Based off of the decisions that we make, it could impact our credit rating. But I know that there have been discussions as to the value of our current credit rating versus the lower credit rating. I do know that that is up for debate. But from West Basin staff's perspective, we're trying to place us in the most financially healthy position that we can be, while again, minimizing the use of debt. Next slide. So this is a new slide that was requested in our conversations with the board president. We want to provide a bit of an historic overview of where we've been with our rates. And so this, on the left-hand side of the chart, you can see dating back to 2021 and 2020, fiscal year 2021, you can see that we had a 0% rate increase that year. That, of course, was in the midst of COVID. But it's worth noting that that was part of an agreement with our customers. We had implemented 3 years prior to that a fixed charge. And so we maintained our RSC, and there was no increase for those 3 years. You can see there in fiscal year 22, we had a 3% rate increase. You can see in 2023, we had a 5%. And you can see again in 2024, we had a 7%. Now, if you look at our overall sales, you can see kind of this significant trend over that period after COVID. And then, of course, you can see that into the future as you see declining sales, and also the drop off or the lowering of the total revenue collected through the standby charge. If you look to the right-hand side of that, yes.
You spoke to the West Basin increases, but the overall increases what our customers are paying is also worth noting. So maybe you can point that out. Because the bottom line is the actual cost of water for 011.
Correct. And I'm happy you pointed that out, because you can see if you look over the history of Metropolitan Water District's rate increases, they have typically been minimal. Metropolitan Water District's assistant general manager And their finance team has oftentimes recommended significantly higher rates, rate increases than have been adopted. And they did maintain those low rates for a number of years. But you can see what happened this year, where they are now tackling the decline in sales, the decline and their significant fixed costs. And although there isn't a representative of Metropolitan Water District here today, they would tell you that these lower rate increases over those years really put them in a position of difficulty this year, which was ultimately handled with a significant rate increase and a doubling of the ad valorem property tax. In moving,
And just expanding on that, as you mentioned, PJ, when you looked at their budget, they ended up adopting a balanced budget, but the reality was that it was based on certain assumptions about sales, because it was a very volumetric based model that generates the revenue. And if you don't meet your sales, then you're gonna have less revenue coming in. That's the issue that Met had. And so this particular year, they were in a very difficult position because they were basically $480 million in the red that they had to then take out of their reserves because the revenue didn't come in. And I think we try to cover for that by adjusting and saying that we're going to predict our water sales conservatively, as opposed to saying we're going to sell this much water as we have done in previous years, and then we have not met those sales, and therefore the revenue is less. And that has been critical. And so this year, the current budget we're looking at, if we do nothing at all, if we don't raise our rates, just the fact that Met should already adopted theirs, our customers are going to see an 11.6 rate increase, 11.6%. Met has not done that in the past. Met had to deal with a honey coming to Jesus moment in recognizing that they needed to reduce the overall sales expectation. I think that they're a little bit on the high side, but they did reduce it quite a bit this year. And it was a tough year at Met to deal with a revenue shortfall. So a lot of the discussion in the budget was how do you deal with the revenue shortfall and the modeling, which is very volumetric based or dependent on water sale. Whereby if you really look at the expenditures in Met, the majority of the expenditures are Met and fixed. Doesn't matter what you do, they could shut everything down and they still have over $1 billion of fixed costs that they can't walk away from. But the revenues don't generate that, the fixed revenues don't generate that kind of money. So there's a real issue there. And I think when we're looking at our budget, we need to also be cognizant of that, and we need to be conservative. And I think this budget does have that. So I think we as a board need to take some credit for recognizing that and trying to be a little more balanced. I don't know if anybody else has comments, but
No.
I would just comment and say that I agree 100%. This really is a moment where agencies need to budget conservatively when it comes to our sales, because as Director Alvarez just pointed out, it really put Metropolitan Water District in a bind. And if you look at West Basin's historic sales and where we are now, we're budgeting for 80,000 acre feet. It was not too long ago that we were well above 100. And if you go back even 10 years beyond that, you're talking above 110, 115,000 acre feet. So we are dealing with a significantly less amount of sales, a significantly less amount of revenue. And we are trying our best to balance that out. But that's what makes the decisions at Metropolitan Water District this year and the decisions at West Basin somewhat difficult because of that. So this does provide you that overview, as Director Alvarez has pointed out. On the right-hand side, again, we use that 0% only as a baseline. So you can look to see what happens with Metropolitan Water District's rate increases. It's 11.6. You can see there that the 5 and 7.5 and 10% are all there for the consideration of the Board of Directors. And I did receive a question earlier from prior to the meeting from Director Houston. And it's important that I had a chance to speak at the El Segundo City Council meeting on Tuesday, talking a little bit about the proposed budget and potential rate increases. And it was discussed that the rate increase could potentially be as high as $14 or roughly $14 for a family per year. But that's actually was on the high end, the 15%. The 10% would represent a little less than $10 per family for the year, a household of 4. And I recognize that it's the totality of the bill. But when you look at the services West Basin provides. Yes, Director.
Great. Welcome. Would you like to say, do you have any comments? We're moving forward, moving through the budget workshop.
This is Director Graham, just joining.
All right, well, welcome on board. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this just provides an overview of those options that we discussed last month, or excuse me, last budget workshop. We can turn. Yes.
Yes.
I just want to say a couple of things at this moment. And one of them is because you know, President talked about what Metropolitan's done, obviously what we're doing at this moment. But I think, and we've seen this in the past too, with some other water districts. I remember a while back, it was one of the ones I think in Orange County, but you know, for the ones that really tried to minimize rate increases over long term. I mean, you know, yes, trying to please their ratepayers and constituents, but not raising the rates accordingly, and found themselves in more precarious situations. And then just as I think the president kind of said as well, you know, Metropolitan is at the higher level, but overestimating your sales and or not accepting reality of the sales, and then turning around and not increasing rates accordingly over potentially many years. Some of these districts have gotten themselves in big trouble. And of course, when they try to reset it, right the ship, of course, you know, kind of all heck breaks loose with the residents, constituents. And that's certainly somewhere we all do not want to be. We want to make sure that we're being responsible with appropriate increases while watching the expenses and the debt. So that's one, I just want to make that observation, because unfortunately we've seen this happen with agencies in the past. And then, you know, the directors and everyone else gets blamed, like, what were you doing? So I think it's important that the public understands, and they see these numbers, that, you know, there are numbers beyond our control locally, and we have to be accountable to make sure that we're raising our rates accordingly to cover expenses. So we don't have to freak out at some point and crank it up massively. That would just be, you know, completely irresponsible. The other thing is, and I am really glad we've worked diligently the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, about being realistic with projections and water sales. And so on this one, you know, we are being very conservative with the 80,000 acre feet.
81.5.
81.5, okay. 81.5. You know, so we've worked hard with staff to let's recalibrate that and make sure we're going to plan for a lower potential sales. So then when we're not hitting projections, you know, it's not coming across as a negative. If anything, we actually sell some more water, it comes across as a positive for what we potentially adopt. So again, we started, I think, at a good base point. And I think we have to realize, though, rate increases need to happen. There is no doubt. It's just a matter of what is the number that makes sense for this district. Last but not least, and I'm glad EJ did mention that, because I had that question. You know, the challenge in this is these are the wholesale numbers. These are, from us to our retailers. They look big on certain levels. You see 11.6 or 13.2%. That translates to the average person like, oh my goodness, that's huge. But, EJ, if you can tell us, I think what we also need to understand is how does that affect the local retail customer? And if I heard you correct, at the higher end, it's not even on this chart. Had we looked at a 15% increase on our side, it was amount to around $14 a year to the average household in the West Basin service area.
That is correct.
So even these numbers you're looking at on this table, there was actually less, maybe $10 for the year
Roughly $9.33,
on the 10% one.
10% per family of four.
So maybe this is something, I don't know if my colleagues agree or not, but in one more formula of this chart at some point in our budget process, you could include something like that. Is there a way we could put a line item into what it translates to at the water bill for a retail resident?
Yes, we're happy to do that. It's important to note that all retailers are different as far as how much
Understood.
per unit.
You have to do an average.
Well, it's just each municipal retailers you have, investor-owned retailers, they have different processes as far as how they collect their rates and how they do their pass-through rates. So it all impacts differently. We do know that that would be roughly the average cost, because we always do for those that are watching at home. Each acre foot, 326,000 gallons, is now 3 households of 4 individuals. And just to highlight the water industry and promote the work that we're doing and the investments in conservation, that used to be 2 households of 4 just a few years ago. And because of conservation, we're up to 3 households.
Maybe I'll just redo my ask. Maybe you could create, since we have multiple retailers, I don't know how you do this 100%, but maybe you could create a standalone chart, or you just do an average. I just think it would be good for our retail people to see what that number translates to approximately.
I don't think it's realistic for us to be able to project what each individual retailer is going to pass it through. They all handle it differently, blend it differently.
Mhm.
But the number that the general manager referred to would be consistent. If you take this and just put it through across the board,
Mhm.
how each individual retailer then decides to either absorb it or pass it. But and it just, I would answer your question, our impact is this, how that is, somebody wants to absorb it all and not pass it through, then
Mhm.
it's up to them. We can't control each individual retailer. And it'll be very hard to try to anticipate that and come up with that table. And you can do it, but you'd have to be making a lot of assumptions.
But we're happy to meet with the individual directors and talk a little bit about the impacts in their individual divisions, because it is always different, especially when you mix in alternative water supplies as well. So.
Okay, so I'll withdraw my request. Go ahead. Thank you.
If we turn to the next slide.
But one last thing, and I know we talk about it a lot in general manager and director Houston, but we can't save enough time. It is a good thing that we are selling less water. Okay, conservation has been a major component of allowing us to meet our water supply demands. And the reality that 1 acre foot of water today is all that's required for 3 families of 4 versus 1 acre foot meeting the demands of 2 families of 4 just 10 years ago. That's a big deal. And I think we need to do more in the conservation area, but we should all take credit for that. It's a big step forward in really being good stewards of our resources and helping meet our demands.
So if we can turn to the next slide. This is just a look, when we talk about the rate increases that we just talked about, the 0, and when we go back and use a cheat sheet, 0, 3, 5, and 7%. This is just illustrative of kind of the impacts of that. And you can see there those 0% increases. And you can see the year-end cash balance and how it used to be roughly 81 million. In COVID, it went up to 97 million. And then you've seen that steady drop off, the 83, 73, and now 69. And really what we're looking at when we talk about these potential rate increases is how that would impact our cash on hand and reserves. And if you're planning to operate the Edwards C. Little Water Recycling Facility and meet our contractual demands, it's going to require some investment. And with the aging infrastructure, it's going to be a little bit of taking an active approach, but also being reactive, because we do have aging facilities that do come across issues. And so having that cash on hand will allow you to make those necessary investments when needed without utilizing debt. Turn to the next slide. In terms of the impact on our recycled water, yes, the cost of recycled water does climb with the cost of our imported water supply. Obviously, from a policy perspective, the use of recycled water should not be cheered upon and really rally behind any more than we already do. But I do want to highlight that there's great value in using recycled water throughout our service area. In those areas, as we've seen with significant drought, those ball fields and parks and green spaces remain green, healthy, and an opportunity for our communities to really enjoy the outdoors. But the cost of producing that water is significant. And so having that cost be parallel with the use of imported water is fair. Exceeding the cost of imported water would likely have an impact on those end users wanting to utilize that water supply. The benefit of having it even in drought is great, but you want to make it cost competitive because the primary users of that purple pipe are our school districts and our municipalities. Next slide.
If I could interrupt you there, also, just moving forward, the state did pass a AB, whatever the number is, I think you know it better than I do. But beginning in 26, and the first focus is on public areas, and then 27 kicks in for the private sector, the elimination of turf. And so the need for recycled water also should go down. If we eliminate turf, not only does it save potable water for those areas where the turf is irrigated with potable water, but regardless of whether it's irrigated with potable or not, the whole idea is moving forward, the elimination of the turf throughout Southern California, which would be again more in the direction of water conservation. So probably when we sit in here 7 to 10 years from now, 1 acre foot of water would be enough for a family for 4 families instead of 3 families. Today we're still using quite a bit of water for irrigation and outdoor watering purposes.
And that important to note that non-functional turf. So your parks and ball fields and stuff like that would always be considered functional.
And medians and things like that are non-functional. And a lot of our communities have lawns around their institutional facilities, et cetera, which we're working with them to replace.
That is correct. And I want to touch on 2 things because the state of California has been very, very proactive when it comes to this. I think that the original legislation that you're referring to was AB 1668 and SB 606, which sets those water use efficiency targets, which will, and we're planning on a drastic reduction in our overall total demand over a period of time. When it comes to the removal of non-functional turf, it's important to note that if that median and grassy area is served by recycled water, they are exempt from the non-functional turf component.
I thought
So those medians would be okay. Again, purple pipe is tough to come by these days, especially in areas where there's a pretty significant urban imprint as far as there's no growth where it's easy to construct at the time of construction. New developments, obviously, purple pipe is a little bit easier to construct. It's cheaper as you're building that out. But when you already have a lot of urban, very little urban infill, it's not as easy to build those purple pipes anymore.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, you can always. make-
No, I mean, I'm glad you both brought that up, but I think in the interim, as that law is slowly, however, going to be implemented, I think it's going to take a while before they get to that spot. And I think it's going to take a lot of education, obviously, to the public to understand it. But in the interim, you know, we do, of course, sell recycled water throughout the service area. We've got a lot of great customers, not just industrial, but the outdoor spaces. And so I think another way to look at it is it does translate to some quality of life issues because of the fact that we can continue to maintain some very nice green spaces, parkways, you know, the green belt, in the beach cities and so on and so forth. And so thankfully, because of that planning years ago, no matter what happens in the next handful of years while we're running the recycled water operations, we can continue to help, you know, keep some of our communities looking green even in the tougher times. Because yeah, as the restrictions come into place and people aren't going to be able to water the medians and other locations where they don't have recycled, I mean, it is what it is. It's going to look a lot more like the desert around Southern California. And so I do think we need to focus on how do we help maybe communicate that to our customers. This is just my perspective, but you know, that, hey, we're also helping maintain the beauty of these cities. This is what a number of our constituents still would like, and we're doing it in a responsible way. Plus, it does translate to water we're saving from the ocean and water that we're reusing in community, as well as water sales for the recycled water program. Because again, we don't know how and when over time we're going to be transitioning into more of the DPR, you know, types of projects, and when those purple pipes completely go away. So it goes back to what I had said earlier. I think we still have to work with our customers as much as possible, that they don't just stop watering the grass because, you know, it might seem like the right thing to do, but yet they're using recycled water. So we do need to, I don't know how you do it, but we got to talk to our customers about that as time keeps moving forward.
Dr. Houston, you make an excellent point, and I'm not trying to drag this meeting out any longer than needed, but there's no better time to talk about the services that West Basin provides than during our budget discussions. And our relationship with our end users, because again, most of them are municipalities and school districts, could not impress me more than this week. Uzi and Frank, we received phone calls. I received phone calls on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and this morning about the excellent service that we provide our customers. Not only are we attentive and immediately responsive, but really willing to bend over backwards to make the end users experience and ultimately the service that we're going to provide the best that it can be. So I can't stress that enough. Again, each day that it's happened has put a smile on my face, and that is a big part of that, Director Houston, reminding them of the use of recycled water and the benefits.
Let me just say one more thing, I mean, on this, and I am going to just reiterate it because I do believe it translates to the current mindset of Southern Californians, right? We're used to an area that has been translated to look like the Midwest. It is what it is. It happened years ago. And we, of course, are now trying to change that and adjust it. And obviously, Nevada's done a lot of work way ahead of us. You know, they put a lot more restrictions on what you can do with outdoor space, grass, and so on and so forth. So as the laws are coming into place in California over time, that will change literally the look, not just Southern California, Northern California too, because the law applied to everywhere, right? EJ, it applied to the whole state. It didn't even matter where you live. You could be up in the mountains, and they're going to do this, right? I still think though, we can emphasize that the cost of the water that's recycled we're providing is a big value to our local constituents. When I say that, I mean residents. Because this, at least at the time, is what they like and what they expect to see, but we're doing it in an environmentally responsible way. So to me personally, it's a win-win-win. As things are going to change, and again, they're going to go into other parts of not only their own cities, but other parts of the greater LA area where there's not recycled water, and they're going to get a totally different look. So, at least parts of our service area will still have the nice green spaces, areas like Playa Vista, so on and so forth, that I think we all have come to enjoy. That over time, I mean, again, that's going to change. So it's many years out. All right, one last thing I do want to bring up while I have the floor, and that's the slide prior, if you don't mind, EJ. And that was just looking at that, or the one before that, I'm sorry. It was page 30 in our packet, that one. Just noting that the year-end cash balance that you have, I mean, we obviously continue to trend downward. Even with these scenarios you have proposed here, we won't have the cash on hand that we even had at the moment, right?
That's correct.
So I'm just kind of noting that and pointing it out for all of us and my colleagues as well. It's like no matter what we do, we have not been having as much cash on hand at the end of the year to work with. So, the decisions we're making are very, very important, but, we're just not even going to be in a space we were in the past thus far. Thank you.
Comments?
Thank you.
Before we move on, I think Director Houston did raise some interesting points. And this is a discussion that I see over and over again, kind of the mixed messaging that water agencies find themselves in. Because on the one hand, we have done a very good job of getting the conservation measure out, and people understand that conserving water is important, and have done great efforts in getting there. But when we look at the next major potential area for water conservation, it's really outdoor water usage. So as we transition to outdoor water usage, the reality is that we do have to change the mindset from a Midwest type of landscape to a very drought tolerant region. So when we go out and we are saying, you need to convert to drought tolerant gardening, that message needs to be consistent and not make it so we get caught up in that, but we make exceptions. We like this, we like that. I'm not quite sure how that will ultimately resolve itself, but it does send a mixed message to the public. That, well, you're asking me to put in a drought tolerant garden, but yet I can go out down the street and see that other people aren't doing it, etc. And it's a tough message for the water industry to convey that we do live in an arid region and the landscape needs to be an arid landscape. A lot of people have lived in that arid region and they never really keep an arid landscape, and it's a big shock when all of a sudden you go, this is the landscape that really is here. Just a mixed message. That's a difficult challenge for us in the water industry.
And President Alvarez, I apologize. You're all just putting the ball on the tee, so I got to take a swing at it. It really comes down to our approach to every customer. So when we go and we talk about the use of recycled water, it's easy to send Frank out and Uzi out and talk about the operations aspect of connecting and what needs to be done. But we don't just do that. We actually send our water use efficiency team. So we try to eliminate as much turf as we can around that. And then our public information and education team. The majority of recycled water users will always have a sign in their area. And I know that when you enter into Hermosa Beach from the south, they actually have a beautiful native landscaped median that clearly outlines the fact that it's utilizing that irrigation or recycled water for irrigation. So it's really about always taking each site and looking at it in a very specific way about what you can reduce, what you can maintain with the use of recycled water, and then how you communicate that with the public. So continue to highlight the work of the team.
Let's continue all the way through the November election too.
So I will just touch real quick on the packet page 32, which is the West Basin fixed charge. It's important to note again that I continue to maintain continuous conversations with all of our retail agencies and talk about the value of this. I've never heard one negative aspect of our public information and education team. The desire to have area-specific communications has never been higher. You know, this is how you achieve what President Alvarez just talked about, which is lowering your water demand by individual municipality, because all of our municipalities are different. Their water usage and demand is different. So really targeting those communities is totally unique to them. And then the next slide is our next steps. And
Comment, Mr. President. And I only say that because I mean, you just brought up the, you know, like the value that part of this fee pays for from this district to our constituents, our retailers, our cities, and you know, and our county unincorporated people too, right? I think, you know, the more I sit back and do think about it, I think you cannot underestimate how much it does mean something, because you know, most of our cities, again, have small staffs. Most of them are lucky if they even have a public information officer. A number of them still probably don't. They may have a person that they have 2 or 3 or 4 roles at the city hall. So every bit of assistance that West Basin can do, and the other thing, we tailor it. I think our staff has done a great job of tailoring the messages to the different cities we serve, because our service area is so broad and big, and the climate is different, you know, and say Gardena versus Malibu versus Palos Verdes, right? So thankfully, you know, you all have done a great job to have the resources here and help amplify that with our city partners, who quite honestly, they just don't have that time, that bandwidth. So I do think that translates very well to the value of this being a part of our budget. And I'll just say that, you know, in the last, I don't know, what, 5 years, give or take. I mean, you know, you all have done a really good job to build those relationships and partnerships with those cities and have a good working relationship so that they can get that information out to our public, which actually that's translated into taking out more grass, you know, getting those rain barrels out there, people actually getting the message during the more difficult times of how we reduce, and they've held the numbers down. So that, you know, public information, education, and the your policy. What's the other water efficiency?
water policy.
Water policy and efficiency, working with, you know, Gus and his team. It means a lot. So I just want to say that I think that that's important, that we maintain that level within, you know, our strategic plan, if you will. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're at the end of the presentation.
We are at the end of the presentation. We did include one supplemental slide, which is just the options. We try to remove a little bit of something we had earlier. It really is just the options available to you as discussed so far. So on the left-hand side is that 0%, and then it goes to 5, the 7.5, and the 10. As you all know, we will need to adopt a budget this month prior to the end of the fiscal year. We do have a regularly scheduled board meeting. As always, West Basin staff is available to the board of directors and can schedule an additional workshop if needed. But what we were looking for is some direction from the board of directors as to what you would like to see a final budget proposal bring for your consideration in that final board meeting.
I want to ask the question now. I'd like to hear staff's recommendations on the final budget.
Staff's recommendation continues to be the 10%.
So let's back up a second here. I appreciate that. what I would like to hear is every director's recommendation, because at the end of the day, it is not the staff's responsibility to adopt a budget. It is the board's responsibility to adopt a budget. And that's a policy decision that should not be delegated to staff, in my opinion. So everybody would like to address where they feel comfortable and what they will be willing to support. That would be, I think, a beneficial discussion for us to have.
I'll start off by saying,
Mr. Chair,
Okay, Director Gray.
yes, I know Director, here said staff recommendation, but I don't have to use the language staff, but I do recommend the 10%. And so that is my, recommendation for the budget for this coming year, for fiscal year. The 10% is what I recommend.
Any other comments that anybody else would like to make, or if not, I'll.
Sure. And I know I missed the last meeting, but I did, read the packet and spoke with general manager. And I understand what was said at that meeting, but I would definitely I do appreciate hearing staff's perspective. Of course, yes, it is in the hands of the board to make the ultimate decision. I think it's good to hear what staff thinks is accurate, let alone. But the 10%, and I know we've taken even the 15% off the table for this discussion at this point from the last meeting. I would have probably been even open-minded to that, just knowing what it translates to on the bottom line of, how much per year for a typical family in our region service area, but we are where we're at. So I would look at 10%.
Well, I still believe that we should, I think, was it 11% we were at?
We actually had the option that had been eliminated was 15%.
Right.
Again, all of those were for illustrative purposes. We can carve it up and go in between any and all of them, but in the last meeting, we had a 15, 10, and 5.
So because staff has better resources than I have in terms of trying to figure out what is the best for our district. So I am with the 10% now.
And before we were at 15?
No,
Oh,
11.
11, okay. All right, I want to talk a little bit about a concept that we haven't discussed, but gets discussed a lot. And that's affordability. I think one of the issues today is affordability in general. And a lot of, that word comes up a lot, and everybody is, I think, has an idea of what they mean by that. And they said, well, everything needs to be affordable. We need to keep in mind that there are people that have a tough time, et cetera. And I look around the room and I look around a lot of our service area. We are fairly comfortable. So our affordability perception of what we can afford is significantly higher, I think, than some of the folks that we serve. I know that in one of my other hats, I do help out, and I meet with people that really have kids primarily, and are looking at what they can afford and sit around. These are people that truly live paycheck to paycheck. I mean, they have a hard time, and we do have them in our service area. We're very fortunate in West Basin that most of our communities are very well-to-do and significantly above the median household income. If you look at a lot of our service area, but we do have within our service area also communities that are hard pressed to even be at the median household income or below the median household income. And to them, it's a real pocketbook issue. whether I'm gonna spend an extra $5 here or $10 there, because by the time they're done paying all their bills, every week, there's not enough money left in the paycheck, so some things get pushed off. So affordability is an issue that I think all of us need to keep in mind, as we move forward. Utilities are a big issue right now. Electrical costs, are going up significantly. People still have to pay their power bill, people have to pay for their gas, people have to pay for the water, people have to pay for a lot of things. And every one of these things, when you sit down with somebody who's barely able to make payments or trying to figure out, what do I pay this month? We can say that, it's only $14 a year. $14 a year to anybody in this room is not that big of a deal. But to a lot of people, when they're looking at it every week to pay their bill, it is a big issue. So I know that we all have, concerns about affordability, and we all want to keep everything affordable. But sometimes we do get, mixed messaging there also, and see what is affordability. Affordability has very much to do with where you're sitting in the pecking order. And we're very fortunate in this room, and we should be grateful for that. But there are a lot of people that we serve that we also need to keep in mind. And if you sit down and really sit down with them, try to work out their, where they're gonna spend their money, and you're saying, but you need to do this. I mean, I've recently sat down with a family and said, well, we're gonna stop paying. You always tell us that we need to pay for the internet, and, they don't have cable, et cetera. I said, but you need that for your children. And they're saying, well, that's another $29 a month, Desi. And I said, yeah, but they need that for the schoolwork, et cetera. And that's a big deal. So if that's $29 a month, which to a lot of us isn't a big deal, to them it is. And they're willing to cut that out because they gotta pay all their other bills. It's a big challenge for families, and I appreciate that a lot. So when I look at our water bills and when we pass these things through, when we talk about affordability, in the back of my mind, I'm saying, I'm sitting down with that family who's telling me, I'm gonna stop paying for my internet service. And I'm saying, you need that because you have 10 and 12-year-old boys that are going to school right now. And they need that for school. Well, they just play games. No, they don't just play games. And so those are the kinds of trade-offs that families are having to make. And I think we forget that, and we need to remember that when we're looking at rates. It's a lot of our communities. That's a majority of our service area and our demographics are very well to do. So I am very concerned about passing through the higher rates. I also understand, and I made that comment earlier, that we actually need to be good business people, because at the end of the day, notwithstanding a lot of the comments that we make, we're running a business. And that's what the public expects, that this business be well managed. And so we do need to have a revenue stream that is sufficient to meet our needs. But we need to also, when we're looking at our needs, make sure that those needs are not extravagant. And there are differences of opinion. What we need to do, what is absolutely necessary versus what would be nice to have. And I think we have a lot of things that are nice to have versus what is absolutely necessary. And I'll go back to an earlier comment that I had made. Here's how much money we spent this year. This is how much money we had budgeted. Well, how much money we spent is probably what we really need. And we probably could have, even if we were very, very mindful, spend less money. When you really have to spend less money, you do, versus what you would like to spend. And we all have likes. So there's a critical balance that we're expected to also address. And it's, what is your needs? What are your wants? And your needs, you need to take care of. Your wants are something nice to have, but not necessary. So I look at our budget and I look at the fact that we need to be prudent. And I think we do need to base our revenues on, realistic, expectations, and we are primarily volumetric based. We don't have a lot of fixed revenues. So we need to understand that and, set our projected expectations of how much, volume of water we're gonna sell at a conservative level. And hopefully we'll sell that much, if not more. And on the other hand, I also look back at the needs, and I think that our needs are less than what we are, our wants, and we're more geared to trying to meet our wants. So I have a harder time raising rates because I think that we can do a better job on the revenue side. Notwithstanding that, I think we also have some capital improvement projects. I, for one, want to hold off on capital improvement projects because I think that we're gonna be looking at a potentially totally different picture. And we don't know what that is until probably sometime next year. And hope that that would have not been the case and that would have been resolved this year, if not last year. It's something we've been grappling with for a while. So I'm not predisposed, and nothing new here to a lot of the capital expenditures that are projected. I'm not quite sure that they're needed, and if they're needed, they may be needed in a different form, once we know what we're going to be in terms of, our overall operation, particularly for the NC level. So at this point, I think that the CIP that's been projected, and there's one project I'm not necessarily supportive of, but the board has decided to move forward with it. So there are a couple of projects in that area, and those are right now, and correct me if, and the staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but in this budget. And so in this budget, whether you go with 0 to 10% rate increase, it will require, in order to keep everything balanced, and I think it is important not to borrow additional money, that we draw down on reserves. And drawing down that reserves will still be around 63 million. Whether you were at 5%, 7.5%, or 10%, not much of a difference in terms of that. And I think that, if this year goes like this year that we're just wrapping up, this new fiscal year, we will probably be able to bring in the budget significantly less than we're budgeting currently. And we'll be approving as we move forward with the recommendations that are in front of us today for consideration. So I understand where the board is. I personally don't think that we need to be at 10%. I think that we can accomplish everything that we need at the 5% level. And I think you can almost do it at 0%. But I, again, showed you the whole issue of, at some point, a dollar here, a dollar there, in and of itself doesn't seem to be that much, but in the aggregate, and that is what you look at when you're looking at the budget. And I'm not talking about just our budgets, but individual budgets for people out there that have to pay all the bills. They're looking at the aggregate. So that additional dollar is on top of every other additional dollar that they've had to incur for the past 10 years. It is not a standalone dollar, and it never is, and it never has. So I'm not quite at the 10%. I would like to be able to support the budget. I think that there's room in there for additional cuts, but we are where we are. Everybody's already expressed their opinions. And the consensus is to leave it where it is right now. I just think that we can do it all, and these numbers kind of show it at less than 10%. So that's my comments and where I'm at. And I think that as far as next steps, I'm not quite sure unless any other board member would like to make any other comment that we need an additional workshop. I think that the staff should work this budget up in the direction, if I understand it. What I heard was move forward with a 10% rate increase.
I think so. You've given your opinion, and I'm gonna tell you how I kind of develop my perspective on how to deal with budgets and the other when it comes to public money. When I was a young guy starting off in this business, one of the things we had to do was to make cost estimates, right? And one of the ways that we learned how to do that, because we were young guys coming out of school, stuff like that, how do you find out how much stuff costs? Say, well, what you have to do is talk to the people who do the costing and those who do the buying. And one of the things I learned is that when you wanted to know what was the cost of doing a little project, we always had small projects to do, that you would go out and ask the people who do the work how much they charge. Well, one thing we learned out there was that the average contractor would say, well, who's this work for? Does this work for you or for the city? Because they knew we worked for the city because we tell them. Well, he said, well, the work is if it's for you, it's going to cost you one thing, and if it's for the city, it's going to cost you something else. Okay. So we'd say, well, the work is it for you or for the city? Say, well, this work is for the city. Well, then it's going to cost you. No one ever gave us a discount because we were with the city. So it's like the insurance companies. If it's your work for your car and you're going to pay for the body work, costs one thing. If it's from the insurance company, well, then it's a little bit different. So no one ever gives us a city going out to doing our work, a government, give the government a discount. No. It's going to cost you more money because of what comes with the city. Comes more paperwork. It costs you more to do work for the city. So that's why we had sometimes need to charge a little bit more to get the work done for the people, is because the people out there who are charging more, the people more money because it is the people. So I'd love to be able to give the city or the public a discount, everything that we do, but we can't do it because no one will give us a discount, the city a discount. So we have to pay a little bit more to get our work done. So I think when you can charge what it should be charged, then you should charge that, and not wait until you get to the point where we are a lot, where we have to all of a sudden do a big charge to meet the budget. And so that's why I say that if we can get the 10% now, because people will now looking at government saying, well, we need to pay more now. Or the next time we won't be able to pay at all because we'll never be able to raise the rate to where it should be. So that's why I'm here at the 10%.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Director Gray, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly. First of all, I don't think we need another budget workshop. What I've heard is that kind of the supermajority of the board kind of supports the 10%. But I do want to say that your comments regarding affordability, I think we're all concerned about affordability, and those were great comments. But for me, I think it was absolutely necessary to do it. staff's recommendation was that, and I supported it. And I think it's important to hear staff's recommendation from their perspective. I think Director Houston made that point. I thought that's a good point because we hired the general manager and he hires folks to be the experts in what they do. And we have to have confidence in what they recommend, but we also have to do our due diligence in terms of our decision to make policy. But in order for us to achieve our mission and our goals and so forth and support the projects that will make us do that and that we will remain whole financially, I think that's important. And that's why, one of the key reasons why I do support the 10%. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Gray. All right, if there's no other comments, then, I think you can bring it back at the, June board meeting for all wrapped up in one nice package for approval. And then let's, return to our, action calendar, and on the action calendar, we did have one item, which is consideration of approval of fiscal year 23-24 district sponsorship request. And Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that item?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. As you mentioned, we do have the one action item, item 5A. And for this presentation, we have Carly Hewitt.
Thank you very much. President Alvarez, members of the board, good morning. We're gonna turn the page back from fiscal year 2024, 2025, back to 2023, 2024, with a district sponsorship request submitted by Grayson's Awareness Outreach for support to their 25th Anniversary Achievement Award Ceremony. The event will take place on Sunday, June 23, at the Provident Restaurant in Los Angeles. And as a recap, Grayson's Awareness Outreach is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing access to safe and nutritious meals for low-income and insecure populations. At this time, they are proposing 3 different sponsorship tiers at $2,000, $1,500, and $1,000. They are a combination of table seats, table signage, quad ops, ads, and recognitions at various again combinations by level. This item is brought by recommendation of Director Gray. What this time is requesting that the board considers approving sponsorship of the 25th Anniversary Achievement Award Ceremony in the amount of $1,500.
I'll move Director Gray's recommendation.
Second,
Any comment? Director Gray, would you like to make any comments?
Well, thank you to the board for considering this item. I think it's really important to make sure that the community is aware of what we do, and I think considering supporting items like this do get the word out. And thank you for considering it.
Okay.
And this is Director Houston. I'll just make a quick comment because I noticed some of the folks being honored, but one of them is the Assembly Member Tina McKinner. So we've all known her for many years, so she's going to be honored. I see also the co-founder of New Directions. So you got some really excellent folks in our regional community who are going to be honored at this. And of course, the cause, the mission, as was already mentioned in the staff report, I think is worthy. So I concur that we should support this. And thank you, Director Gray, for bringing it to our attention.
Okay, with no other comments, we will have a vote.
Director Scott Houston,
Yes.
Director John Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Harold Williams,
yes.
President Desi Alvarez.
Okay.
He said no. Consistent.
Yeah.
Being very consistent.
Yeah.
I'll wait until he wants something fast.
So, we don't have, information calendar. We did that already. Closed session, we don't have any closed session today. Any comments for future agenda items from the board?
Mr. President, I just have a point of clarification. Does this go directly to the full next board meeting, or does it have to go through a committee meeting? Or can we just bypass that? I don't remember our process on this.
I'm assuming, and I think I said, bring this back at the next board meeting, because pretty much we've gone through it. I thought we had a very good discussion today. We've seen all the numbers. That it would come back, one nice, crisply
Yeah, I understand.
package at the next board meeting, which is typically when we adopt the budget. It's always at the beginning of June.
Correct. It's at the board's discretion. After these number of workshops, I think staff has clear direction as to what to bring back. And so I believe we can just bring that back to the full board with the appropriate resolutions.
I would concur. I just wanted to make sure it doesn't need to go to finance. It doesn't need one more round of anything. It doesn't need to be published any more prior. So I think that's great. And then as the chair of the finance committee, we will not have that on our agenda, right? Okay. Well, I'll do my other comments on this. I just want to say, I think this has been very productive. We've had a number of workshops. I think our staff has worked diligently to meet our requests as best you can. Been conservative when it comes to the projected water sales. And we are all trying to move through our new reality, not just now, but in the last couple of years and what we anticipate going forward. And I also just want to say too, I wholeheartedly agree with Director Alvarez and everyone's opinion on water affordability. As a matter of fact, we're going to have a panel later this month, BizFed Water Forum. And one of the panels will be on that topic. And we were just doing a planning meeting the other day, but ironically, I actually brought it up. All of our own ideas of affordability are different. And so what's affordable to one is not affordable to the eyes of another. And that's a hard question to answer. And so quite frankly, this panel will have people from public agencies, private sector, nonprofits talking about it. And how do we plan the future and make sure it's quote unquote affordable? And so you're maintaining the infrastructure, you're dealing with probably less sales in the future. And then you're thinking about what are those big, new and small future projects. So it's not lost on me or a lot of us about, the broad range of affordability. So think about how much it does translate to the end user. I know we're being cognizant of that and being really, really good stewards of our public dollars. And lastly, we've just been good supporters with our lawmakers when it comes to how do we think about water affordability, right? So what's Senator Padilla trying to do at the federal level? What are we looking at in Sacramento? And what our local retailers can help assist with as well. So it's a collective effort, but we should not lose any thought on affordability and how that does translate. And some people do prioritize some things that I would also say, I'm amazed that people, they're probably more concerned about, the cell phone, the latest and greatest, what have you. And then they, when the gas price goes up, they're of course screaming. Or when the utility prices goes up, they're screaming, but they're buying new cell phone packages and all these other nice things. And it's just it's part of our society and where people put their priorities. As well as the ones that just don't have any extra. So anyway, thank you for all the good discussion. And that's all I have, Mr. President.
If there are no other comments,
Director,
Um,
Mr.
yes,
Chair.
Director Gray, go ahead.
Yeah, since I assume this is the last budget workshop, so I want to acknowledge our staff and the general manager because thank you for listening to the board and bringing back, different options for us to consider. And I know it's a lot of work. I do appreciate it, but just want to acknowledge the staff and the general manager for that and for the board being engaged in the budget process. So thank you.
Okay. And if there are no other comments,
Yeah, I do want to say, on behalf of finance department, I do want to say very appreciate all the directions that the board had providing to us, suggestions and comments. And then, thank you for the board to supporting the budget process.
So with that, we are adjourned and our next meeting is June 24th.